Hello everybody, it's Jam, and before the video starts, I just wanted to say this is part 1 of 3 of a little story I was working on. I was trying to get the whole thing out by Halloween, but it just didn't end up working, thanks to my full-time job, taking away all of my time and energy. Anyway, I still wanted to get an audio out, so, what you're about to listen to is Act 1 of the full 3 acts. I'm gonna try to finish the other 2 and release them simultaneously in the upcoming week or so. So, expect that. But yeah, this is Act 1, as I said before. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this intro, and I hope you enjoy the story. Bye-bye.
I just love the sweet sound of suffering. Oh, hello there. You just caught me in the middle of my nightly broadcast. Who do those screams belong to? Oh, don't worry about all that. It's not important. What I'm interested in is what are you doing here? You heard screaming from afar and wanted to investigate? My, how fascinating. Well, while you're here, how about a little story? Yes, of course. If I'm not mistaken, it is Halloween night, is it not? And what's Halloween without a little bit of a fright? Just sit back, relax, and immerse yourself in my world for a while. It was the year 1928. Prohibition was in full effect. The economy was booming. For another year, that is. And your friend Alastor found his stride as a popular Louisiana radio host who just loved hunting down a story. Ha ha ha! Hello, dear listeners. That was the latest song from... And might I say, what a toe tapper. Now, more news from around the city. There have been multiple reports of odd green glows coming from the sugar refinery in the industrial district. While these glows don't seem to cause harm, if you find yourself working late and these glows accompany your walk home, I recommend not investigating. That's what the professionals are for, after all. Ha ha! In other news, Granny Griselda's cat stuck in a tree. While I loved entertaining the masses, I loved breaking stories even more. So the idea of being the first to solve this ominous green glow mystery just made my mouth water. You can imagine how my excitement consumed me. I just had to go see it for myself. And so, after my final broadcast of the night, I locked up the radio station and made my way down to the industrial district.
There doesn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary from the outside, and every door I can find is locked. Perhaps I was too quick in becoming engrossed in this mystery, and to think I could have spent my night on one of my other hobbies.
Just when I was ready to turn tail and forget about the matter, it happened. A green light started emanating from the refinery. The glow was real, and there was no doubt in my mind that it was coming from that sugar refinery.
So those reports were true. Interesting. Now I just need to find a way in. Those windows don't look too high up. really should have tried that to begin with. These sloppy workers rarely know how to properly lock up for the night. It's what makes these places so useful for different activities.
Entering the factory filled me with an immediate flood of dread. The air was so thick and palpable. Even something as simple as breathing became a laborious task. The light from inside was also exponentially more intense than how it appeared from the outside. Just looking into the light dazed me, and I needed to take a moment just to let my eyes adjust to such an unnatural light. However, I needed to press on. I was so close to discovering the origin of such wonder, I could almost taste it. My imagination was running wild, and every possibility that ran through my head was equally insane and plausible.
The light may be intense, but I can't give up. It looks like the source of the light is coming from that stairwell. This place can't have a basement, though, can it?
Though the light seemed to be engulfing the entirety of the room, there were definitely layers to the intensity. Layers that led down to the basement. So I moved on, moving with more caution than I exhibited outside. This was, after all, an unknown, possibly dangerous situation, and I was in no position to risk my neck. I thought that if I kept moving, I'd eventually adapt to my surroundings and lose this feeling of the air closing in around me. But quite the opposite quickly became apparent. Every step I took was more difficult than the last, and I felt as though my lungs were risking implosion with every breath. That was until I reached the bottom of the stairs, and finally came to the origin of the light. Unfortunately, it came with some unexpected obstacles. As I reached the end of the steps, I was faced with a large stone door with a green light beaming from the cracks and the gaps between the hinges. It had strange symbols carved into it, symbols that I have never seen before. They were powerful and sharp, yet flowed across the door like vines. The shape of each symbol was almost impossible to comprehend, and just inspecting it sent a throb through my head. I should have turned back there. If I were anyone else, I would have. But my curiosity and resolve was at its peak. I was right there. The truth was a push away. I quietly pushed the door, and as I pushed, I came to the realization that this door was even more strange than what I had previously thought. It was thick and heavy, not in a weight sense. In fact, the door was unnaturally light to push, but the stone was full, so the idea of it being as light as it was just added to the odd nature of this place. I quickly found the reason for the door's thickness as it continued to open. What was once a quiet stairwell quickly became filled with the sound of both the chanting of a crowd and the pleads of someone who was clearly not there willingly.
What the hell? Are there people here?
This new information vexed me. However, there was a silver lining. The chaos of whatever sick, twisted ritual they were performing in there meant that I could open the door fully without risking them hearing me. And that I did. And what I saw on the other side of that door, I can only describe as something straight from hell. And I would know. I peered into a large room with 8 pillars that appeared to be made of marble, equally spaced around the center of a lit cauldron. It burned a green flame that was so intense that I felt as though my skin was charring, despite being a considerable distance away. I wasn't able to focus on the embers for long, however, as my attention was quickly ripped away to one of the pillars that was surrounded by 8 hooded figures, repeating some sort of chant. After what felt like an eternity, they finally stopped chanting long enough for me to hear the distinct cries of a man.
Please, let me go. Let me go! Please.
Though I wasn't able to see the producer of such cries, I could only assume that he was not a friend of the rest of the mystery men. Another eternity passed when one of the speakers spoke up and finally gave insight as to what exactly I was witnessing.
Brothers, the time of our salvation is fast approaching, as we have found another sacrifice worthy of our god Irafi, the face below the waves, the great eel, the one who will deliver us from this mortal plane and escort our spirits into the world below. To shed our mortal shells and birth anew, we must each do one thing. Burn thy flesh with the eternal flame.
Burn the flesh. Burn the flesh. Burn the flesh.
Brothers, tonight our God has brought us a vessel of divinity. He has infiltrated his dreams, corrupted his mind, and brought him to us. And now we do as our God commands, and we burn thy flesh.
Just then, I see 4 of the men bend down and lift up a man wearing similar robes to the rest of them. However, he was also equipped with various talismans tied to his body. What they signify, I could only guess at the time. They hoisted him up and pinned him to the pillar, all while 3 other cultists tied him down. After the man was properly secured, they each backed up, and I noticed the leader of the group holding a torch with a flame that resembled the embers from the altar.
Is that the eternal flame they mentioned?
Before my question could fully leave my lips, the leader threw his arms out to the tied-up man and lit him ablaze. Cheers erupted from the other cultists as the man on the pillar screamed in agony. Now, by this point, I was fully aware and used to how people scream before their death. It was something I reveled in usually, but this was different. His screams weren't alone. It was as if he owned a second, deeper set of vocal cords that screamed with him. Furthermore, the smell was something else. It didn't hit me at first, but when it did, I nearly gagged. It was a sharp, piercing stench that bore its way deep into my sinuses. It smelled of sulfur and rot, but amplified due to the smoke wafting it around the room. While trying to process the whole scene, I pried my eyes away just enough to get a better look at the other pillars in the room. That is when I noticed that each pillar had a body assigned to it, from what I could only assume was past rituals. They were equally charred and disfigured, like meat that was left in the oven for too long, burnt to a crisp from the outside in. I also took note that there were 2 pillars left that did not house any signs of use in their rituals quite yet.
So they need 2 more sacrifices.
I said to myself. I could not ponder my question for long, however, as something began to happen to the burning man on the pillar. The flames that once covered his entire body started seeping up and into his eyes, nose, and mouth. It was as if he was inhaling the fire, as to alleviate his burning flesh. Once all the flames disappeared into his body, he finally slumped over, and I could hear his final exhale of air. This is when I decided that I've seen quite enough, and snuck out of there before being noticed. I'm afraid fate had other plans for me. I'm not sure when it happened. If it was when my attention was fixated on the sacrifice, or if it was while I was examining the room. Either way, I failed to notice that the leader of the cultists slipped out at some point, and in my haste to exit, I slammed into him at the top of the stairs. From afar, he seemed like a regular person, albeit a tad creepy under all those robes. But up close, I was able to get a better look and find out that I could not be more wrong. His face was rather normal at a glance, appearing to be an average, old, pale man. But upon closer inspection, I could tell that there was something off about him. His eyes were pitch black, and I don't just mean the pupil. I mean the entirety of his eye was coated in black. They were cold, terrifying to stare into. They weren't completely empty, though. The longer I stared, the more I noticed something swimming in them, like the king of the sea swimming through the black abyss. Eternity laid in those eyes, an eternity that I've never felt before, but will become all too familiar with again.
You're not supposed to be here.
The cultist sliced through the silence as he attempted to grab hold of me. I was a rather scrawny guy at the time, though, and easily evaded his grasp.
My apologies, chum. I'm running late to something, and I really must be making my leave now.
I made my quick escape, and didn't stop running until I saw the lights of a major road where I knew they wouldn't follow chase. Once I finally felt safe enough to slow down, my mind finally had a moment to rest and process exactly what I just saw.
What? What the fuck was that? I've never seen anything like that. Who was he? What was he?
So many questions rushed their way through my mind at lightning speed. I couldn't possibly focus on one long enough to find a proper answer. Out of all my thoughts, one thing was certain. My heart was racing. Something that only occurred when I'm hunting prey. Why was my adrenaline pumping so much? I wondered. Quickly, I realized what I was feeling wasn't fear or anything akin to that. It was excitement. I witnessed things tonight that I've never thought possible. And now that this world has been opened up to me, I needed to know more. I was itching to go back. But since I was noticed by the cult leader, I knew that they would be on high alert, and finding out more would be much more difficult. My mind, now focusing on a single objective, allowed the adrenaline coursing through my body to finally settle and fully bring how utterly exhausted I was into focus. If I was going to follow through with my investigation, I needed rest. Even in my exhausted state, I knew that there was a chance of me being followed, and in my paranoia, I decided that it probably wasn't a good idea to lead any possible stalkers right to my home. Furthermore, the radio broadcasting station wasn't too far away. So, I decided that my best course of action would be to sleep there for the night. It was safe in the way that I could lock all the doors and windows, but also public enough that if any intruders did make their appearance, it would be hard to not draw attention from anyone passing by.
I can't believe people like that exist in this city. For a while, I thought I was the only one.
These were the last words that crossed my lips as I finally gave in to my fatigue and slipped into a slumber.